Welcome to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Our mission is to bring you discussions on a wide array of topics in the coaching world to grow players on and off the court. You can connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, and also reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Now, here's your host, Coach Mike Hernandez.
Welcome back. Thank you guys so much for joining us wherever you are, whatever platform you are listening to us on. I think by the time this episode releases, this will be episode 50, which is incredible that we've already done 50 episodes. So as always, I say it every episode, as always, thank you so much for your support, for spreading this podcast, spreading the word to everybody, and just sharing it with people and spreading the great conversations that I get to have with these guests. And those conversations are going to continue here on this episode because this topic is very topical, for a lack of a better term, because by the time this episode is released, a lot of you are going to be right in the thick of your season. A lot of you will have been playing games, and a lot of you will be looking at film, not just of upcoming opponents, but of past games that you've coached, looking to find ways to improve, looking to find ways to get better, and just in general, breaking down film. And that is the topic of today's episode, which is going to be specifically about breaking down film and going over film after a loss, how to dissect that film, how to take what you've learned, give that information to your players, apply it so that you're better the next time. We're really going to get into some nuts and bolts here about breaking down film, specifically after a losing effort. So I'm very happy to be joined by Coach Philip McCaslin, who's going to talk to us about this topic. Coach, how are things going today?
Hey, they're great. I appreciate you having me on. Appreciate you guys doing this, promoting the game of basketball. More people that can talk about this great game, more opportunity we have. Film something that we take a lot of pride in. So I'm super excited to get on here and chat a little bit. Just more opportunity to help grow this great game that we have.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to give you the platform to do so. So, Coach, before we get started, let's go ahead and get started with your basketball journey, your coaching journey. Where's the game kind of taking you and the coaching journey taking you?
Well, obviously I'm in Texas. Right now I work at a school just outside of Waco called China Spring. This is my second year there. And this is, I guess, my 10th year overall coaching. And, I've kind of just coached around the state. It's my 6th year, I guess, as a head coach, and a lot of ups, a lot of downs, coached at a lot of little schools, a lot of big schools, so I've kind of gotten an opportunity to see a lot of different basketball. I've coached girls for a year one time, and then been on the boys side for the last 9 years. And, really getting into coaching, I didn't know, being in Texas, I didn't know if I was going to be a football coach or a basketball coach. And I kind of thought I'd be a little bit of both, but I don't think there's anything better than being able to be a basketball coach. And so, and obviously I'm biased, but it's been the greatest job I could have ever asked for, is being able to coach basketball at a high level, being able to teach this game to kids. And so that's a little bit about me, kind of where I've been around, but definitely happy with where I'm at and, what I've been able to be doing.
So I'm always curious because I've had a couple guests on who are from Texas, and for those who don't know, maybe those who are listening internationally, specifically Texas, huge football state. Football is incredibly important over there in Texas. And so I'm always curious, for basketball coaches like yourself over in Texas, do you find yourself having to kind of navigate the fact that football is king and that football seems to be all important in Texas? Is that a situation that you've dealt with in your coaching career? Yeah. I'm just curious what that's been like.
Absolutely. And I think you made the correct word. The word is navigate. You can't ever think that you're going to defeat it. And the word, you really got to embrace it. You got to embrace how you work with it, and how you embrace the good that comes from football and the culture that football creates in the school.
Sure.
Because football can create a culture in a school really unlike any other sport that we have in our state, just because of its importance to the community and the people. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, as a basketball coach, there's things that you need to get done and accomplished, and goals that you have as a program as well. And pride that you take in your program. So the word is, like you said, navigate. And without a doubt, there's challenging days, but there's also really rewarding days with it. And so being able to navigate football is just part of being a basketball coach in Texas. And, it's just kind of the reality. And, it's just about embracing it. And like you said, trying to find a way to make the best of it.
Sure. And I think that's something you brought up about the culture that football brings, or maybe if you're at a school where a different sport is like really popular, really important to that community, that it might be important as a coach to kind of think about, okay, what kind of culture does that sport kind of create? What kind of culture and momentum does that sport sort of have in the community? And how can you as a basketball coach maybe sort of like take some of that, or kind of steal some of that energy for yourself and for your program, figure out, well, hey, what's working for them that's getting, everybody excited and everybody interested, and how can I steal some of that for my own program? I know that it's great when, football's really excited and people are really pumped about football. Then, oh man, it's basketball season. People stay just as excited about that. I can imagine that would be pretty great to kind of have that almost like year-round intense sporting culture.
and that's we're kind of we're blessed to, I'm very blessed to be at a school where we have a lot of success in a lot of sports. And so, just having a culture of winning in your school, it just does, it's monumental for every part of your school, from, your drama club to your band, to your football team, to your soccer team, your basketball team. When you have that culture of winning across your campus, it just does wonders for just the little everyday wins, so to speak, win in the process. So, it's without a doubt, the word is, just navigating, and, that's part of high school athletics, being able to navigate. Last year we had one of our all district posts, he made it to all state choir, and so when we're at kind of the level that we're at, and, we had to work out some conflicts and some things like that. And but it just kind of says that, like we said, the culture of being successful that we have.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's really cool to hear. Now, our topic, as we kind of mentioned, is going to be about breaking down film and going over film kind of specifically after a loss. So I want to thank you, because I know that kind of talking about breaking down film after losing efforts specifically. So I know that it could be a little touchy, I know, for some coaches. So thank you for being willing to talk about it. But before I even get into kind of the guts of this topic, I'm curious, because for a lot of young coaches specifically, the idea of breaking down film, it's kind of like, oh, like, where do I start? Like, what do I do? Like, what does the process even look like? So I'm curious for you, how you watch film. Like, what is your setup? What is your process for doing it? Has it always been the same? Has it changed throughout the years? Like, how do you kind of attack game film, so to speak?
Well, that's that's a great question. And I think you said, I've had to evolve kind of how I do it. But to me, we ask really a few specific questions, and then the kids have those questions. But when I watch it, I grade their film the same way, and they get an offensive grade and a defensive grade. And then the only stats that we chart in our locker room, we chart charges in terms of if they've attempts and takes, in terms of how many charges they attempted to take and then how many they took. And then we chart dives and then possessions. And so those are the only things that in terms of I actually stat. I don't do points and rebounds. We send it off to a program that does that, and I'll maybe look at that once a month. But the only thing that's in our locker room is a board that really has how many for the season, how many dives in terms of how many times you dove on the floor in possessions, and then how many charges you attempted and have taken. And so what that does is it really shows, because those are the two things where you are clearly selling out, in our opinion, to try to save possessions and try to create momentum plays. And the kids can then see it through the year. And as they see it, there's a ton of accountability that comes with that. Because, you look at player Y, and player Y's got 20 attempts and 12 takes through 5 games. You go, man, this guy's selling out for us. Yeah. And then player X has, 1 attempt and 1 take through 5 games. And you go, well, I don't know how much this guy's really selling out. And then how I watch it, when we grade it, they get a plus minus grade. and really we grade offensive, defensive, and culture. And so, offensively, we really grade in 3 areas. Do you value the basketball? Can you execute your assignment? And then can you execute your transition assignment? Are you getting back? Are you crashing the glass? We crash the glass a lot. We have a lot of big athletic kids. The joke I always say is, as long as the ball hits the rim, we're going to have a chance. I don't care how it gets there. I just want the ball on the rim. And so, and then defensively, we grade, do we communicate? Do we jump to the ball? And do we block out? And those are really the 3 things. And so when they get a plus-minus grade, it may look, for example, offensive grade, let's say a player is getting pressed and he gets trapped and he pivots through the trap, splits the trap, makes a bounce pass to a teammate. Well, he's going to get a plus right there. And let's say then the next possession, that player is getting trapped on the sideline and he dribbles down the sideline with his head down and he dribbles right into a trap in the front court and turns it over. Well, that's going to be a minus. And then at the end of the game, I may look and player Z has, +6 on offense overall. And so then I'll post that grade with their kind of attempts and their takes and their dives and possessions. And so they'll get that offensive grade and then that defensive grade. And so the way we do it is really just so we can see throughout the year, when we watch this game film, are their grades consistent? Are they improving? And then I also look at, well, what's been consistent in terms of why are they grading high or why are they grading low? And it just gives me another data point that I can see rather than something, that may not tell me as much, such as a plus-minus stat or, a VORP stat or, PER stat or something like that.
Sure.
I think it gives me a better feel of how they actually played.
How long is that process of going through a game and doing this? And in my mind, this seems like it might take a while, and I might be right or might be wrong. How long does it kind of take you to go through a game? And is it just you doing it? Does your staff get involved? What's that process like?
Well, obviously, being in Texas, it's just me grading the film. I've only got a 2-man staff, or I guess a 3-man staff total. I've got 2 assistants. They're both good guys. They do a great job. But they've got, our freshman team, our JV team, they've got a lot of duties. They in terms of, they still have football duties they have to complete. And so us kind of getting together to watch film is, time is always rare. So usually I'm the one that kind of, does it. We will watch scout film together, and I'll send them scout film that I want, or if I may send them quarters in terms of, and I'll ask them to watch a specific quarter and say, what did you guys see in this quarter that worked well? What kid played well, especially if I'm trying to get another opinion on something. And it really doesn't take as long as you think. Honestly, if an hour and a half game, I can usually do it in about the same amount of game time. So, if we've got a 7:30 tip at home and I'm back at the house at 9:30, I turn on the tape and, I can usually have it graded and the way I want it, probably by, 11:15, 11:30. So it's not a, like I said, the plus minus, because I'm only asking 3 questions. I never asked, did they make the shot, or, did they pass, was it a bounce pass or a chest pass, or, did they set their screen? It's really just, are we taking care of the ball? Do we know what we're supposed to do on the offensive end? And then do we execute in transition? Do we crash or do we get back? And so I think by limiting the questions, it keeps it clear for the kids what we're expecting from them, and it keeps it clear for me.
And I know a couple people who just heard you say that you do film after a game, like right after a game. I know a few people in particular who are listening whose eyebrows are raising at that, because I know some coaches who after a game, especially if it's a loss, they're done. They can't even think about the game, and then they got to go to bed. They got to do something else. But you don't have that problem. You can break down that film right away, and you're on to the next. Is that kind of like your philosophy?
I don't know another way to do, the way our, league is set up, we play Tuesdays and Fridays. And so, if you think about it, if we have a Tuesday night game, we want to watch film on Wednesday, and I want to have a grade for them so they know what they can compare their own grade to when they watch film. And then Wednesday afternoon, we need to start at least preparing for what we're going to do on Friday for Friday's opponent. And so, we just, and so, usually a lot of times I'll have the film graded Tuesday night. I may go back through Wednesday morning before I might see the kids. But by Wednesday afternoon, basketball is one of those things is, you just don't have time to enjoy the wins or the losses. You just, it's what makes this great game. And there's so many opportunities to play that there's just not enough time for celebration or sorrow. So
it's kind of that on to the next. So I guess it is a little bit different than football where, you have the week in between games and maybe you can take a night and have like the weekend. But if you're of the mindset of, hey, like we got another game coming in a couple of days, so I got to get this game done, make sure I'm ready for the next game, then, time is of the essence. I suppose that makes a lot of sense. And I want to ask about the plus minus system real quick that you have. One of the examples that you gave was about like taking care of the ball. Are all of the pluses and minuses equal? So if, a big man doesn't take care of the ball, I'm just throwing out an example, they have the ball and they're dribbling down court for whatever reason, who knows? And they're not able to take care of the ball and they make a mistake versus, your point guard who always has the ball in your hands. I guess my question is, are all of those pluses and minuses equal? Are there different things taken into account when you do that?
That's a great question. I'll, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, I've run into that dilemma a lot of times because, how do you value in the second quarter, a missed block out and, you give that kid a minus versus, you're down one late and on the free throw block out, the kid doesn't block out the shooter and the shooter comes in to get the rebound. You want to make that minus big, I'll even when I do it on my paper, I'm still kind of old school. I film by hand with a pen and paper and, and I grade the film, I'll have a big minus when something like that goes on. It takes up, half the page. But the way you look at it is the same way we look at film in terms of the game is a process. It's not won or lost on one possession. It's not won or lost, with one play. And so, with that being said, every successful play, every time we successfully value the ball or block out, that kid deserves that positive. He doesn't choose always, we can't just choose to perform in big moments or at certain times. It's all about the process and it's choosing to perform at a consistent rate. But I agree. I've run into that dilemma many a times. And so to be honest, no, all of them are equaled out the same in terms of, if that guard dribbles into pressure into the front court after breaking it and throws up some sort of garbage floater. That's the same minus as if the big man, caught the ball at midcourt and took 3 steps before he started to dribble and travel. We view both of those as not. That's why we use the phrase value the ball. One is a turnover, one is a bad shot, but there's still not value in the basketball.
Sure.
And so, a lot of times if a turnover is, that guard shouldn't have thrown it to the big man, they both get a minus. Big man needs to learn how to step to the ball and, obviously catch it with 2 feet and 2 hands and then pivot before he dribbles. And the guard needs to know that he shouldn't throw it to our post running the pipe. He needs to throw it to the pitch ahead man and let him throw it to him when he's at the rim. And, so, both of them are going to get a minus on that play. I have no problem handing out minuses and, pluses are sometimes harder to earn, but,
sure.
And that's kind of how we, but without a doubt, that's a great point. I personally haven't discovered how to kind of weight them more, but I think it just goes back to just trusting and believing in the process of the game.
Yeah, I think I personally would probably get lost in the weeds too much. Then I'd have to start having like a weighting scale for my pluses and my minuses. And
Exactly.
It might become too much math for me, especially if I want to get it done in an hour and a half using that system.
Yeah.
Now, I wanted to make sure that kind of touched on specifically like the process after a loss to a team that you would consider to be like a tougher team and a team that maybe I'm not going to say you're expecting to lose to them, but like it was a hard fought game and it was a team that you knew was going to be tough going into it. Is your process at all different? I know you still do the pluses and I know you still do the minuses, but are there different things that you might look for when you know you're playing against, one of those more top level contender type teams?
Absolutely. We don't change necessarily how we watch the film, but what we will change is we're going to be very intentional about, we always ask the questions, how do we win? How do you win and how we believe we win versus and how do you lose. And what we're going to look at when we look at the film, we're going to watch, those specific, when we talk about the questions, the things that we needed to do to try to win. So let's say we're playing a much tougher, more athletic team that love to press. And, we said, we cannot have live ball turnovers by passing the ball. If you're going to turn the ball over, pivot for 5 seconds and let us set up our defense. And,
Sure.
Whatever, we'll play 5-on-5. We just can't throw the ball away and let them
just throw the ball out of bounds rather than give up a turnover.
So,
yeah, I get you.
And so what we'll do is we may clip those plays, and let's say we had 9 live ball turnovers and they got 14 points off of it. We may clip those plays and talk about specifically what we didn't do and what we're going to have to do when we play an opponent like that in the future. And so I think when you play a team that is better than you, and you got to look at you got to excel in a certain categories, I think your kids need to see what they did well as well against those. And so we'll look at a couple opportunities. We'll clip some plays where we have the kids take care of the ball against live ball pressure and not turn it over. Or if they do turn it over, it's a dead ball turnover or, something like that. And so we'll clip that and talk about, how do we find more of these types of plays and how do we minimize those other plays? And so when you're playing a better team, I think you have to be very intentional about what you're doing and very specific. And so we just try to be specific. We try not to worry about, names or rankings or, I'm terrible with names. Everyone's got a number, and so, I don't know anybody else's names on the other team. It's not to be offensive, but, if somebody's, some sort of 5-star all-star, he's number 4 on our scout report,
Sure.
And so, and that's kind of how I kind of approach it. And, we try to approach it as well, is just being specific about it. And I think that really helps rather than worrying about trying to do anything grandiose.
Well, I know that in my situation, one of the things that I've had come up sometimes, like looking over film, losing to a team that's a tough team, is all of a sudden I have like 25 things that I see that are just like stick out to me. Like live ball turnovers might be, number 10 out of the list of 25 things that I see.
Sure.
So for you, when you see this, and I think all coaches kind of fall in this trap where they just see like everything negative and they see every single thing that they want to fix, right at that moment. Are there certain things that you emphasize? Are there certain things that you have to make sure that get fixed when you see it on film? Like, okay, we lost this game and I see all these little things that we can do, but we got to make sure we like do this or focus on this. What's that mentality like?
Boy, that's a great question. That is so tough. Because us as coaches, I think we just naturally want to make it right.
Yep.
We know what it's supposed to look like and we want to make it right. And because when it's right, it's awesome. And, and we all know that it's an unbelievable feeling when your team is right and when they're playing right. And that's a hard concept to get to. I think what we try to do is we try to make sure when there is something that we know we have to fix, for instance, we had a tough loss a couple weeks ago and we didn't block out anybody. We didn't block out the people in the stands. We didn't block out the concession stand, the ticket taker. We didn't block out the kids playing in the parking lot. We didn't block out anybody. And so what we did is I actually clipped some plays from earlier in the week in a different game. And I kind of put them of us actually blocking out. And I showed just our different effort levels, same kids, same types of shots. And I tried to mirror them as close as possible. And I think you just have to highlight what's important to you. And you got to fix that, and you got to show them kind of specifically the differences of what it looks like when we do it right and what it looks like when we do it wrong. And I think when kids see that on film and they say, hey, on Tuesday, I did this. I was on the backside of a corner 3, and I went and found my man and blocked out and secured the long rebound, versus on this time, I'm on the backside of the corner 3, and I ran to the rim, and the ball went over the top of me and got kicked out for another 3. And they see it's the same thing. And I think it instills confidence because they see themselves do it correctly. And if you don't have games you do it correctly, film practice and then compare practice. I've had to do that. There's been lean years before that I've had, and there wasn't a whole lot of highlights in games I could compare to. And so we'd film practice and show the differences in practice in games and say, we can do this. And so I think you got to give your kids confidence in specifics.
And I mean, I've been there. Just with the blockout example, I remember breaking down a film, and I think I saw like 20 straight possessions of like one player in particular who didn't block anyone out. And then finally on the 21st one, I saw her block someone out, and I was like, okay, I have to clip this one because I have to have something
Yep.
positive. Because I think, like you said, it's
Yep.
really easy to kind of bury your team and all the things that they do wrong. And I don't necessarily think that's the best way to kind of go about it. I don't think the players will necessarily respond that way. I mean, I'm sure a lot of us have had coaches that have kind of taught that way, just bury you with everything you do wrong, and, you know, you better fix it. But
Yeah.
it's a tricky balance, I think.
I've been that coach, you know, and so trust me, I've been that coach that was sat in the film room with the laser pointer, and man, I mean, we wouldn't get past, you know, it would take us 45 minutes to watch 3 possessions, because I would just kind of hammer away, and I kind of had to evolve, and that's why I really went to my 3 questions for offense, defense, and culture, just because I was like, you know what, I gotta pick what's going to be important to me and what we value as a program. And boy, trust me, every time we set a bad screen, I want to give that kid 12 minuses. But at the same time, and, you know, I want to watch that clip for 40 minutes. But at the same time, we got to move on. And, you know, and yes, he's got to get better. And we're going to do drills to set better screens and things like that. But then you got to highlight the things that you do well. And you got to make sure that you're improving in those areas that you have to take care of to win the game. And so, you know, I think that's kind of how I've had to kind of learn to approach it.
And I think that just helps with just focusing in on specific things in general, or the things that your program values or that you value as a coach, where there's certain things that, you know, you don't necessarily want to like let go, but there are certain things then, and you can probably speak to this, that if you see it on film, like, you want to stop, pause everything and be like, absolutely not. Whatever this I just saw on film, like, this cannot happen again. And that would be something that you would like want to emphasize and want to go over, especially if it is after a loss, and maybe it was even a close loss, and you're like, okay, there might be 25 other things I want to correct, but like, absolutely, this one particular thing has to be remedied, and I'm going to make sure my team knows it. It seems like you have certain things that fit that criteria.
You know, absolutely. I think one of the big things, you know, to me, those 2 things that you just, you know, we always talk, you know, your defense sets your floor as a team. You know, there are no bad teams that play great defense. You know, there's a lot of bad teams that can shoot the lights out of the ball. You know, but there are no bad teams that play great defense. And so your defense sets your floor. And for us, really the 2 things that are just, you know, no excuses, no questions, no discussion is we're going to be the first to the floor on loose balls. We're going to block out, and we're going to run back in transition. And so, you know, if we see anything like that, you know, we see a kid getting beat on loose ball, or just a missed block out, or a kid walking back in transition, or not running back, and, you know, we're going to highlight those. And they know, and I think we've done a good enough job, is it doesn't matter if we lost by 1 or 40 or 1 by 50. If we see something like that, we're going to stop it, and we're going to make sure we highlight that and fix it right then and there. Sure. You know, a thing like a kid getting stripped at midcourt, or a travel, you know, those are process mistakes. And you know, we can, that's about being good about what are we doing in practice to improve this. But those 3, those are some non-negotiables for us.
Well, I think that's a good distinction, and something that I'd like to think I've gotten a little bit better at is differentiating between like effort versus like process. What are the things that are teachable versus what are the things of like, you just have to give effort and have to be trying. And if you're not doing that, then, you know, that isn't teachable. You know, like you said, like not getting on the floor for a loose ball, or not, you know, running back after a turnover, or whatever those case may be. Like, those are the things that don't require any basketball skills. So if you're not doing that, then what happened here? Yeah, no, I totally get that. Absolutely. Now, I wanted to touch on kind of on the other side of that coin, when it's a loss to a team where either they upset you, or it's like a game that you watch the film and you're like, okay, we had this game. Like, what happened? Like, we lost it rather than the other team won. Is it the same process? Are there certain other things you look for? Because I can imagine for me, it would be tough to look at that game maybe the same way? If I was like, oh man, this is a team I know we should have beat, I may look at the film a little bit differently. Do you do that, or is it the same process?
You know, it's really tough to take out emotion.
Sure.
You know, we try to be,
Yep.
And especially when I try to grade it afterwards, I really try not to, and I don't always do a good job of it, but I try to take emotion as much as you can out. And you always have to ask the question, why did we win or why did we lose? And then when you know the why, you know, a lot of times I think us as coaches, you know, it's a 1-point game one way or another. And you know, we celebrate one and we're miserable in the other. And you got to be able to identify, why did we win or why did we lose? And so when you lose to an inferior team, or you lose to a team that you believe you got more talent than, you got to look at why, and you got to look at why did we lose. And sometimes it is that they had more talent than you think, and maybe you didn't identify the talent well. And then why you lost was, you know, I'd have to ask the question. I've had this before. We lost because I didn't identify the talent very well. I didn't watch the scout film well. I didn't put us in a good position to win the game. But a lot of times it's usually for mistakes that you've got to identify. And, you know, for instance, like I said, we lost to a team I believe we had more talent than a few weeks ago. We had to identify it. We didn't block out, and we gave up too many second chances. It put us in bad foul situations, let them get in the bonus. And they struggled to score, and it let them get to the free throw line. And so we had to look at it. We watched a lot of clips of us not blocking out. And then we were intentional about in practice blocking out. And we talked about playing time and how you're going to earn it by blocking out. And I think you have to, you know, you got to identify why you lose when you lose to a team. And then you've got to be intentional about fixing it and fixing it fast. I don't think you can try to play long games when you lose to a team, you know, and talk about process. Because when you lose to a team that you got more talent than, or you believe you have more talent than, it's usually an egregious error, like blocking out, bad shot selection, fouling, you know, things that you just can't do to be a successful team.
And if in this particular instance, and you can speak if you have examples about this, where maybe you lose to a team you feel like you had more talent than, or as a team that you were supposed to beat, and maybe, you know, your team didn't block out like they were supposed to, but that team is also one that you're going to see again later in the season. When you're communicating that message to your players, are you know, focusing on, hey, like, we just need to make sure that we block out and also do all of these other things? Do you communicate like a different message when you lose to a team you're supposed to, but you know you're going to play them again? How do you sort of navigate that? Do you have to re-scout them? I'm curious about what your approach is for maybe the next time you're going to play that team.
You know, absolutely. I think the big thing that, you know, anytime you win or lose against somebody that you're going to play again, you got to go read back and you got to evaluate what happened in that game. And you got to make sure, you know, let's say, you know, you win the game by 16 points, you know, you have a great success. You got to identify why you had it and what you did well. And then what are the things that you got to assume that they're going to try to take away from you and how you counter them. And then on the flip side, you know, you lose to a team, whether it be by 1 or 10 or 12 or 20, whatever it is, you got to identify what they took away from you or what they did well. And how are you going to take that away from them, and then anticipate the counters? And so what we would say with our kids, you know, we lost to a team and let's say we just struggled to contain them on the glass, or, you know, we didn't force a lot of turnovers. You know, we got to make sure going in, we're going to do situations or drills and practice situations where we emphasize, and maybe we can score it differently or compete differently to find ways to make sure we emphasize the things that we know we have to do the next time we play them to be successful. And I think when you kids, I've always believed this, kids love goals, kids love specifics, kids struggle with ambiguity. They you know, they don't want to be vague. And so, you know, if I say something like, you know, we have to block out better, I feel like I'm being really vague. And so, you know, when I say we're about to play team 4 again, and team 4 was plus 12 on the offensive rebounds against us, particularly they got 8 out of 12 of their 3-point misses. We're going to say on every 3-pointer, they get 1 shot. We're going to say they only get to shoot 1 3. and we're going to win every long rebound. And I think when you're more specific about those types of situations, I think it almost triggers in your kid's brain rather than just block out. They see, and you can't do it for a lot. You can't do it for 50 things because you overload the brain. But when you specify what you have to do differently, I think kids respond to that.
Yeah, I think that it's easier just for a player to just understand specifically what's being asked of them, and then there's no ambiguity to it. There's no like guesswork, like, oh, okay, I have to do this specific thing. And for you also, it's really easy to measure whether or not it happened or not. There's no like, oh, did they think they were doing the right thing or not? Like, no, like this is specifically what I asked you to do, and either it got done or it didn't. And this kind of leads into kind of the next question that I was going to ask. When your players know that, they lost a tough game, and they know that whether it was to a team that upset them or a tough team, one of the challenges that coaches have is trying to get their players kind of like back on track and ready to keep going and not being down after a loss. How do you as a coach just kind of make sure that, things keep moving along and that they don't have that bad taste in their mouth after a loss? Because as you said, in some cases, they might have a game, the very next day.
Yep. I think the big thing is you don't change what you do or who you are or how you do things. And so, I think sometimes we worry about how we, after a win or after a loss, what does the next day look like? For us, the next day always looks the same, no matter what. And I think what you just have to do and then when your kids lose a tough one like that, kids, you need them to be honest with you, but you need them to also or you need to be honest with your kids. And that's, I think if you just are, and so a lot of times after we lose a tough one, I said, we lost a really tough game. It's disappointing. We didn't play very well in certain spots. And then we played really well at certain spots to help us get in it or whatever it may be. But, you move on from it by doing the same thing and having your kids believe in that process. Whether you win them all or lose them all, you're only going to play, heck, this year, you're not going to play that many, but in a normal year, you only play 35 games or so. And so and we work at this, coach, I'm sure, with all you do, you probably work at this 364 days out of the year. And so, you can't get too up or too down on one night or one shot or one buzzer beater that goes your way or doesn't, the other thing we always talk about too is, you think about a game where, you think you dominated somebody, you win by 16 points. That means you won 2 possessions a quarter. And that's how close basketball is margins. You only won 2 possessions a quarter, and then you end up winning by 16. And so, the way we do it is you just approach it the same. You attack every day the same way. And if you attack every day the same way, I think your kids trust the process and they trust that these wins or losses don't define them. Because I think when kids get too up or down, it's because they believe that result defined them. Sure. And so, and that's so tough. And we as coaches do that, we think we're a great coach because we drew up a play and the ball went in late. Well, if the ball doesn't go in, then what kind of play was that, coach? That's a dumb play, And so I think you just have to always do it the same so kids trust that there's something more to this rather than just the result.
Sure. And I think a challenge that I know I had, especially when I was just starting out of coaching, and I think a lot of coaches kind of go through this process as well, is, after a loss or 2 or more than 2 in my case that I've been in my career, is the desire almost to like blow everything up and to think, well, my this 2-3 doesn't work anymore, or this 4 out 1 in, we got to blow everything up, and maintaining confidence in your identity. So what was that process like for you, where you're able to just sort of have that next day mentality and not, after a couple losses think that, you need to draw up all new, sideline out of bounds plays or new press breakers? How have you kind of maintained the course personally as a coach?
That's a great question. Like you said, experience, because I've been I was 5 years ago, I was at a school and we had 11 seniors. We had probably the best class that had come through there. We started out 3-0 and then, or 4-0, I can't remember. We went on like a 13-game losing streak. We ended up being, unfortunately, we didn't do very well that year. We struggled. And, we had 5 good guards. We were a 5-out motion team. And then we went to a 5-out flex. And then I brought up a younger kid that was a big, and we went to a 4-out 1-in. And then at the end of the year, I looked back, and what I learned is we weren't very good at anything. We were bad at lots of different things. And I think that was the year personally. And like you said, I think that's experience. And that's a tough challenge. And so now we've kind of embraced, this is who we are. This is what we do. This is how we play on defense. Offensively, we kind of adjust based off of personnel. But I can tell you right now, we're going to be a man defense, 99 possessions out of 100. And you have to come at us. And our kids, I think I had to gain confidence by honestly seeing some success. But at the same time, I had to gain confidence that I knew what I was talking about. I knew what I was doing. Seeing kids get better at it and seeing programs get better and grow, I think really was something that I had to seize time and trusting that you can't be good at everything in this. And you got to identify what you feel good about, what your kids can do, and then you got to stick with that. And if you're going to change it, you got to make sure that that you're willing to live with the fact that when you change something like that, you're kind of getting rid of a long segment of what you've done and who you are. Yeah. And that's tough, Coach. Like you said, the only way I got through that was failing. And, and I failed, and man, we threw, you probably would not be able to identify what offense or defense we were in at the end of the year, because we probably ran through the whole YouTube selection, or, that was a little before Twitter, before Twitter was big, I guess. But yeah. And I had to fail that way to really understand that you got to trust with what you do, and you got to trust who you are, and you got to live with results, and you got to be process driven.
Sure. And I think, like you said, that kind of comes with experience and just kind of growing your own knowledge in the game and knowing what you're talking about. Like you mentioned that, like, I know that this can work, or I have faith that this process will work because of X, Y, and Z, or like you said, if experience, because you've seen it work before as a coach, and you know that like this is a system that works, or a play that works, or whatever the case may be. But yeah, it definitely is hard, especially as a younger coach, if you don't have that experience to fall back on. And like you said, you're just going on YouTube and ready to, blow everything up every week, which isn't the best approach either to be taking. Now, I wanted to ask, the idea about the pluses and minuses that you have is specifically in the way that you communicate to your players how they did in a game, or whether they were successful or not. Because I know for me personally, especially as a teenager, if I knew I had like any minuses or anything negative, that's all I wanted to focus on, and that's all I wanted to fix. And I would overcompensate, like, oh, coach said I didn't take a charge, well, I'm going to try and take 50 charges the next game. So how do you kind of parse through getting the information to your players without them being too overwhelmed with information or reacting inappropriately to it?
Yeah. I think, when we post their grades, I don't post how many minuses they get for each question or each category, whatever it may be. What we do instead is, when we watch film as we go through the game, and we don't always get to even watch the whole game. Time doesn't usually permit us. We usually watch 2 quarters of a game, depending on the time and things like that. But what I'll do is I'll stop it and I'll say, hey, right here, what you call it's player D, your minuses, you had 5 minuses last game. 3 of them were for not jumping to the ball. And I want you to watch as we go through these next quarters, where and why you didn't jump to the ball. And if you're struggling with something, what it is that you might be struggling is, so we can identify and get better. But you didn't jump to the ball 3 different times, and they ended up curling us for a layup. And, that was 3 of your minuses. And so I think what that does then, and then we move on, we watch the film. So we don't identify necessarily every specific play. So I won't stop it, and let that particular instance, that player, they got curled 3 times. I'm not going to stop it on the next 2 curls because we got film and we got other kids that got to watch stuff. But that player then knows as he's watching it where his minuses came from and what he didn't do well. And so I think rather than harping on every single minus, so to speak, and say, oh, this is a minus, that's a minus, that's a minus, we try to tell them generally kind of where their minuses are usually coming from. Because a lot of times it's kids making similar mistakes. If that kid, you mentioned that girl that didn't block out 20 times in a row, I think a lot of times when I grade the film, kids generally, unfortunately, make the same mistake often or have the same bad habit. And it's about identifying those bad habits or those things that they struggle with and then minimizing those.
Mm-hmm. And I think that is a trap that as a coach is a little easy to fall into, where if I'm going to watch film and I notice, player J, didn't hedge on this screen properly like 3 times, then if I watch film again and I know, okay, great, they corrected that mistake and now they've made these different mistakes that they didn't make last time. Well, now I'm going to get on that player for these different mistakes that they made versus like, I have to also make sure I acknowledge the things that they did well. So when you're watching film and you know that you brought something up to a player that they needed to fix, are you looking to see if they did fix that as well when you're watching film?
I think absolutely. I'm going to identify, from the previous game. And, when we clip, we usually, like I said, watch 2 quarters, but I usually clip probably 20 possessions. And, on all our film grade sheets, it asks them, they keep their own sheet. And at the end, it says, things that they did well, and then things that they need to work on. And they identify one of those 9 things that they need to either get better at or continue to work on, or they did well, or they need to work on. And so from there, what we'll do is, if I know particularly, like you said, player J didn't hedge a screen last game, but then in this game he does, or what we're going to do is we're going to start with one of our first clips is player J hedging a screen. And we're going to talk about that's a player that's being intentional about his improvement, that's getting better at something. We're going to highlight that early through the film session. We really try to start film a lot of times with positive.
Yeah.
Fill the middle with correcting mistakes and end with positive. I try to sandwich positive and things that we did well around kind of what we need to correct. I don't always do that because, to be honest, you got to earn positives too. You can't, I don't think, kids hate if they're not feeling like they're able to get better, true players, the kids that you're going to want to go to games with and in the trenches with and things like that. They want to know that they're getting better. And so I think you still have to find your positives, but you got to find your correctable mistakes too.
And do you want your players watching film? What sort of access do you want with your own players watching film? I know some players will watch, everything and over and over and over again. I know some who wouldn't bother, don't feel the need to watch it. What's kind of your belief on that?
Well, I think, a lot of times players really enjoy watching themselves, and they definitely enjoy certain things. And I'll ask them, and from time to time, maybe later in the year, if we didn't have the time to watch certain things, I sometimes will ask them to watch some scout film to become a little bit familiar with an opponent. But watching themselves, I kind of think the kids are going to do that on their own. They're going to watch themselves. They're going to see themselves. They're going to watch. And how they watch it, obviously I'd love them to watch it in the same analytical viewpoint that we do. But also, I don't know if I'm going to win that battle. I think they're going to watch themselves get the steal and make the layup. So, and they'll replay that and post it and things like that. So I think really, if you want your players watching film on their own, you have to have some sort of it's got to be treated just like the same way as a teacher. You give them an assignment, in terms of, I would have to ask them to return, and we've done this before, but you have to ask them to return a grade sheet or something that they've done themselves to have some sort of accountability with
Sure. And I think that is helpful almost to kind of encourage your players to maybe look at their film, especially the things that they do well, and you kind of emphasize that. I'm thinking just as like maybe a time saving mechanism for a coach is, if you really emphasize that you want your players to look at all the things that they do well, and you might emphasize some of them in your own film session, but then you don't maybe necessarily have to spend as much time kind of going over all the positives because you're encouraging your players to do that individually. Like, yeah, you can go watch yourself get that steal and get that like dunk or that layup or whatever. Great. Like, I want you to. But here in this particular film session, we're going to really focus on like the things that we need to do to get better. But like you said, you'll also maybe sprinkle in some things that they did well that maybe they wouldn't have noticed because, some of the things that the players do well, I feel like sometimes they don't even know what they did, or maybe they don't even know that they did it well. So that could be a good time saving mechanism as well, for sure. Now, go ahead.
Go ahead. I was going to say, we try to highlight some hidden positives,
Sure.
In terms of, we had a player early in the year, we're playing a team and they're running kind of this continuous motion, and it's got a flex cut and a down screen. It's kind of flexish, but there's a little bit more screen to screener.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, and we had a player kind of hang out on the flex cut to help his buddy out who didn't jump to the ball. And then he sprinted out to still close out on the down screen and still got home in time. And, we spent probably a full 2 minutes on that play alone, just highlighting, here's a guy being unselfish. And I think kids really appreciate that because they know what they're trying to do. And they're going to hear from everybody about their layup or their three or their steal or their dunk. And I think that creates kind of that foxhole mentality when you rave about those little plays that nobody sees and nobody really can recognize other than the people in there. I think it creates that mentality that the people in this locker room see and appreciate me, and I'm going to see them and appreciate them. And I think you got to find those hidden, true basketball positives to really make your kids embrace each other, and where kids are being selfless. And so, without a doubt, they're going to watch themselves score 15 points or, block a shot. But when we find the positives, we're going to find those hidden plays somehow, whether it's an offensive rebound tip or somebody doing something great defensively or an extra pass somewhere. And we're going to sell the heck out of that because I think that creates that bond that you got to have to be a really good basketball team.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And it's like you said, it's those little things that, it kind of creates that connection there where like you saw it and maybe nobody else kind of realizes what you did, but like, oh, I picked up on it. I know why you did that sort of thing.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure. Do you, it doesn't sound like you do, but I wanted to ask anyway, do you ever have games where you lose, where you just have that, like, I'm going to just throw away this game film. Like there's nothing of value here. Like, I don't even want to look at this film, or is every game, even every loss, like you're going to still break it down and make sure that you emphasize or write down something?
No, we're going to watch them all. Boy, there are times, many a times I've been in my career, I wanted to throw things away like that, but we're going to watch them all. And if we have a really bad one, we're going to watch more of it, and always I tell them, I said, look, I had to watch this, so you're going to watch it too. But no, we watch it all. We approach it all the same. There's just too much value. And, like we said, we don't play too many of these, we know we play a lot, but it's in such a short span. Last year in December, we played 19 games in December, and so, I mean, it was a wild month, but at the same time, that's 19 is well over half your season. You just can't throw away these learning opportunities, as bad or as good as they've been. And I've had, I'll put up my bat against anybody, but we still get down and watch them and get better from them.
Yeah. And like you said, it can get tough, and I'm sure pretty tedious, if you're on that losing streak and you'd say you're on 10 game losing streak and you're looking at film of game 8, and, you kind of have to kind of get yourself through it and kind of get things, the way you need them to be. But like you mentioned, you feel like that there's value in it, and there's always kind of things to kind of take away from it. And if that's, who you are and that's your identity, then that's something that you need to stick with and you need to like keep doing, because that's something that you pride yourself on. I'm curious, since you're the one who does, the breaking down and you're going through the pluses and the minuses, how much do you then communicate to your staff? Like, what's the message that you give them? I know you kind of talked a little bit about that. I just wanted to circle back to that. How do you kind of communicate what you saw and make sure that you hit what you needed to with your staff?
And that's kind of one of the things that where we're at. Like I said, my staff is they're great guys and they do a heck of a job. But when we do kind of, we don't really truly have what we'd call a varsity assistant.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of have their teams, and what we'll do after a varsity game is we'll kind of discuss it and they'll have their input. And then what I'll take from the film, and, let's say we go with the pluses and minuses, what I may go ask them is say, hey, player L has been starting for us, but he's graded out at -7, in the last, or on average of -7 the last 5 games. And player R is grading out at +3. And so I'll ask them, I'll say, if you guys can, I want you guys to watch and practice today and really watch what you guys feel player R does better than player L or something like that. And what I'll try to do is try to get their input to either confirm what I'm seeing, or to give me another viewpoint and make me maybe go back through the film and look at it in a different lens point. I've been fortunate. I have been on staffs where we have kind of an offensive coach or a defensive coordinator, and we would split that plus minus.
Yeah.
And then we would compare our grades afterwards. When I've been on staffs where we kind of had that luxury, and we would kind of compare the two. And in doing that, I think that, one, it gives you way more eyes, and 2, it lets you really truly evaluate what that player is. Is he just a one side of the ball player, or does he actually really provide value to both sides?
Mm-hmm.
And so, but I think really what our staff does a good job of, our 2 assistants, they really are able to kind of look at and then provide their own opinion. The last thing that you can be on a staff, and whoever's listening is an assistant coach or whatever, the last thing in the world is be a yes man. Be honest, and don't take it personal. Just be honest. And if you think player J isn't very good and doesn't need to play, say it. And then when player J gets on the floor, well, that's part of being the assistant. And, but at the same time, you said your opinion. And so, and that's what our 2 assistants do a great job, is being honest about things.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's helpful in a couple ways for you, is that you kind of do all the film and you get to go through your process, but then you're still giving some responsibility and you're giving a task for the members of your staff to do, so that they still have some input in the process, because you're right. I mean, I know I've been there before where I get like tunnel vision and like I just see this and nothing can convince me otherwise unless somebody says something or somebody else sees something. And I'm sure you've had experience of that too, where like you just see something a certain way and somebody else has to like say something to you or point something out to you, and that's like, oh, I never would have thought of that or would have never seen that. And so I think overall it just seems like it's really important to just have assistants who, like you said, are going to be honest, and who you trust yourself and you trust what it is that they're going to say, because that's a whole nother different thing, isn't it?
Yes. No, they, and that's the thing. They're honest about it. Yes. No, they're honest, work hard, and they give me, and they help. And that's the thing throughout the season, is just having people that can help either confirm, and that gives you the validity when you do have to make changes, like we talked about earlier. People saying, hey, coach, this offense isn't very good that you've been running for 2 months. And when we do this right here, it's a lot better. But you have to trust those people. And you got to have people in your corner to help you out with those types of decisions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Last question before we hit our concluding segment. This is always a touchy one, I know, for people to think of, is that last game. Not many coaches get to end with a win. Most of us end with a loss. And so what does that film do for you? Is it used for something for next year? Is it have, what purpose does it serve for you? What does that last game, if it ends in a loss for you, what does that film do for you as a coach?
Well, I think it, and it just goes back to what we already hit a little bit of is, why did we win and why did we lose?
Sure.
And, obviously that's the question. Why did we lose? Obviously when you have a good season, sometimes you lose because the other team's got a lot more talent than you. And, you're going to run into that late in the year. And if you're happy about how you executed your game plan and you're happy about how your kids have played, and we ran into that last year. I thought we really had a good game plan. We played really well, and in our regional semifinal game, and we lost because the other team had a whole lot more talent than us. And that was just the nature of where we were and how the game went, and that's okay. We played really well and tried to execute what we needed to do to win the game. So I think you have to always identify why you lost, and once you identify why it is, if it's something that you can fix in the future, you do your best not to lose in that same way the following year. And so, by all means, every game has value. I know those coaches that have never watched a game after they lost because it's too heartbreaking or too difficult. And I get that. I totally understand that. But I just think there's too much value in learning from the games. Put the tape on, and grind through it, and you're going to get value out of it.
And with that, kind of as an additional question to that, once that last game, and if it ends in a loss, and you've gone for the film, and now it's time to go into your off season and go into that procedure, how much of the overall film that you watched that previous year, does that have any effect on changes you might do in the off season, or different types of books or clinics that you go to? How much does that film kind of affect what you may or may not do the following year?
I think it really, we'll do, I take into some of that. The big thing that you always have to look at is you got to look at who is in your district, who are the best teams in your district or your league or your division, and how do you beat those teams with your personnel. And, us as high school coaches, or obviously I don't know who all's listening to this, but I'm assuming quite a few high school coaches, our personnel changes. We don't get to recruit always a certain type of kid. And, I'm not at Kansas. I don't always get to recruit two bigs, or West Virginia and be able to recruit elite perimeter defenders, or, things like that. And so you got to find the way. What does your personnel do best to beat the best teams on your schedule? And what you got to look at then is take that film and watch the best teams on your schedule and what your result was against them, and how do you exploit what they do poorly, and how do you minimize what they do well. And so you have to start with I love watching games that we win more than anybody, but you got to take the games against the teams. We have two teams in our district. We're in districts here in Texas that are very, very good. They're always going to be in our district. They're 10 minutes away from us.
Sure.
They always have athletes. They're always really well coached. Well, I'm going to watch those games more than anybody else.
Yep.
And we're going to watch, and we're going to find out what they do well and how do we minimize those. And so I think you have to attack film in that regard.
Yeah. I think that's important to always remember, is that you're not, reloading like a collegiate program necessarily, and that you just have to take an honest reflection of who you got, who you're playing. And I think that having that mentality of, just kind of maintaining that confidence in who you are and what you believe in, so that maybe you'll make the minor tweaks and minor changes. But even for me, the thought of just like completely overhauling everything just because of something that may have happened the past year, I think that wouldn't personally work for me. But like you said, I think that there's always some value that can be taken away from film, and there's always, little tweaks and changes, and maybe you will find that there's something you need to completely change, but can always get better, and always can at least tweak something. I think that's for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But like you said, the last thing is when you're running the program is to try to overhaul. I can't, like I said, I don't, it's one of those things you got to really identify what your team does well and what the other
Sure.
teams that you have to beat don't do well.
Yeah.
And when you do that, you got to put your kids just in positions to be successful and understand what types of kids that you have. And where we're at, we've got really good, hardworking kids. We've got some athletes. We've got kids that grind in the gym. And so we're going to, but we don't necessarily always have some of the same, rangy perimeter athletes that other guys have. So us putting installing, a full diamond pressure in March and April isn't putting our kids in, we're not going to come out in January and do that. So, but at the same time, there's always things that we can adjust and do better.
Sure. No, I've had a coaching friend of mine who kind of shared this story. He was on a staff of a coach who wanted to, blow everything up in the off season and completely install something brand new on offense and brand new on defense. But they had, I think it was 6 returning seniors and 5 of them were starters. And he was telling me we can do this, but you have this system that was working, but maybe just wasn't getting them through this next ceiling, but they wanted to revamp and rehaul everything. And then he said, I think they won 5 games that year or something. But I get it. I get that temptation of sure. We've only hit this certain level at this system. So let's completely blow everything up. But then all of a sudden you realize it isn't always greener on the other side. Right. So
absolutely. Every decision that you always ask, is always kind of the phrasing that we use is, does this decision either raise our floor or does it raise our ceiling? Because I always believe that, you want to do both, but a lot of times in coaching, it's a trade-off.
Sure.
In terms of, and like what you mentioned, you might raise your ceiling by putting in this new offense or new defense, but you also lowered your floor. And so if that new offense and new defense doesn't work, you end up, like you said, winning 5 games. and so in every decision, we always kind of ask, is this a raise a floor decision or is this a raise a ceiling decision?
Yeah.
And then when you raise the floor, we all want to, but it also lowers your ceiling. Sometimes you got to raise the floor just to kind of get through and grind and get your kids in a spot that they can at least be competent and successful. But we all want to raise our ceiling installs, and we all want to play faster, and we all want to shoot more, and we all want to do things like that.
Don't want to do it all.
Yes, we all want to do all that. We all want to press, and we all want to play fast and play 15 kids and and all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, you always have to look at it in those 2 lenses, kind of the ceiling floor analogy.
Yep. Yeah. And 100% agree. I think that so much has to be taken into consideration because of course we want to do everything, but we also have limits on our time and so do the players. They have limits and how much time they can give as well, especially if we're at the high school level. Yeah. Yep. So to wrap up, Coach, there's a couple questions I ask every guest. So the first one is, what is a coaching moment of yours from your career that you think others listening would be able to learn from?
When you emailed me this question, I could have, I went through a whole bunch of questions, and obviously some high moments and some low moments and things like that. And I think that the moment that I think I would tell other coaches that I learned the most from was really, I had a group of seniors this past year, and we had a great season and great time and a lot of success. But I think really when I looked back at it is the success that we had is because I put a lot of time and energy into them as people, not as basketball players. And I think that's one of the things, as somebody as analytical and as film watching and X and O as me, and nobody loves that stuff more than I do. And it's cliche, but you got to put time into your players. And you got to put time into them as people. You got to find out, and you don't need to always know every detail. I don't know every player on my team, who they're dating, or I don't know their Snapchat handle and all that other kind of stuff. But I do know kind of what makes them tick, or I try to find out, and what they want to do one day, and who they are, or who they want to be. And I know a little bit about their families, and I want to learn more. And I think you got to invest time into people. And, I don't think I always did a good job of that as a young coach. And so, it's cliche, and you hear it all the time at clinics, and you read it all the time in books. And there's a reason it's always written there is you got to put time into these players as people.
Sure.
They're not just a letter on the whiteboard. And that's challenging, I think, as coaches, because we love this ball so much. We love it. It's so special. We want it to be right. But it's not going to get right if you don't truly put that time into them as people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's truly it's a different type of investment, especially at the high school level versus, at other levels, with the amount of things that are happening in their lives and the amount of growth and development that they have as people. And that saying about, what you put in is what you get out. I mean, there's a reason why that saying is as popular as it is, because, how much you invest in them, you usually get that in return, even if it isn't necessarily in basketball, but just you'll get something out of that relationship in return. And you never know like what effect you'll have on that player and what that would meant to them to put as much time and energy in investing in them as people. So yeah, I like that a lot. And to wrap up, Coach, I give every guest what I call a 60-second soapbox. It's a platform for you to get out your final thought, your closing message, kind of your final idea that you want to leave the listeners with. So, Coach, I'm going to go ahead and give you the floor.
Well, if you listen this long, I appreciate it, because I can promise you, well, number one, you're doing yourself a great service and you're trying to get better. And I hope you got something from this. But what I would say is, all of you guys that have listened to this and are continuing to get better, don't let your results of whatever this season ends up define you. I've personally had a year I've gone 2-20, and I've had a year where, we took a team to the furthest in school history. I've had playoff appearances and I've lost by 70. I've won by 50, and I've had a lot. And the thing that, that I've had to get better at is not letting results define me, who I am as a person, as a coach. And so if you're here and you're grinding and you're working, you're on a podcast, you're obviously investing your time. Because I can promise you, nobody that's listening to this podcast doesn't love basketball. If you listen to this much about film watching, so don't let whatever happens on next Tuesday or next Friday or next Saturday night or whatever night you guys play again, whether you win or lose, if you put your kids in a position to be successful, you prepared them the right way. However the ball bounces is however the ball bounces, but it doesn't define you as a coach, because you're already doing a lot to put yourself in a position to be successful.
Great. And couldn't agree more that there's, as you mentioned, there's a lot of ups, there's a lot of downs, but if you're continually looking to get better, then good things happen. If you're willing to put in that much to get better, whether it's listening to podcasts, reading books, whatever the case may be, breaking down film, that time you put in, it will make a difference. And the more you spend getting better, the better you're going to be for your players and give them the experience that they should have for their high school or collegiate career, or whatever the case may be. So yeah, I really like that thought a lot. That was great. And Coach, I want to thank you for spending some time talking about film, talking about more than just film, and all the other topics and points that we covered. It was a really good conversation. So I want to thank you for that. Best of luck going forward. As I mentioned off air, you're probably the first guest that I've had who's actually in the trenches right now, in the season right now. So good luck with your games that are coming up very soon. So Coach McCaslin, thank you so much. Best of luck going forward. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on. It was a blast. All right. Appreciate it, Coach.
Thank you. And thank you for all of you who listened. This was another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys next time.
Thank you for listening to another edition of the Basketball Teacher Podcast. Make sure to connect with us on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter, or reach us directly through email at basketballteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Take care, be safe, and we'll see you next time.